When we talk about the Temptations, the timeless harmonies, the Motown magic, the voices that defined an era, names like David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks usually steal the spotlight. But hidden behind the fame and the falsetto was the deep, resonant voice that anchored the group. Melvin "Blue" Franklin. Rarely mentioned, often overlooked, and quietly essential, Melvin was the soul beneath the spotlight, the base that gave the Temptations their foundation. Yet his story remains largely untold until now. In this video, we're taking you inside the abandoned home that once belonged to Melvin Franklin. We'll explore the heartbreaking reality of his net worth, the legacy he left behind, and the tragic circumstances surrounding his untimely death. From his humble beginnings in Montgomery, Alabama, to his quiet but powerful role in one of the greatest musical groups of all time. This is the story they didn't tell you. David English was born on October 12, 1942, in Montgomery, Alabama, to a teenage mother named Rose English, who had grown up in Mobile. Rose's early life was marked by hardship. Her pregnancy was the result of a non-consensual relationship with a preacher from her family's church. Despite the circumstances, her son would grow up to become one of the greatest bass singers in the history of soul music. After David's birth, Rose married a man named Willard Franklin. As newlyweds, the couple began planning a fresh start for their family in Detroit, Michigan. But before the move could happen, Rose's mother, known in the family as Sister Rose, offered to take care of David in Montgomery. And so, for the first decade of his life, David stayed behind with his grandmother while his mother and stepfather settled in the North. It wasn't until 1952, at the age of 10, that David finally joined his mother and stepfather in Detroit. There, he would begin to come into his own. As a teenager in Detroit, David developed a deep love for music. His favorite color was blue, and friends affectionately gave him the nickname Blue, a name that would stick with him for the rest of his life. When he began performing, he adopted the stage name Melvin Franklin. Blue quickly became active in Detroit's vibrant local music scene, joining several vocal groups around the city. One of them was the Voice Masters, where he performed alongside Lamont Dozier and a young David Ruffin. He also sang with Richard Street, his cousin and another future member of the Temptations. In those early days, Blue would sometimes even refer to Ruffin as his cousin too. Whether as a term of endearment or confusion, no one can say for sure. In 1958, Blue graduated from Detroit's Northwestern High School. That same year, fate stepped in when he crossed paths with Otis Williams, a fellow student with big musical dreams. The first time Melvin "Blue" Franklin and Otis Williams met, things got off to a rocky start. Blue, cautious and street smart, assumed Otis was part of a gang and might be trying to rob him, so he took off running. But Otis wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for talent. After hearing Blue sing one day, he knew he had to track him down. Once the misunderstanding was cleared up, the two quickly formed a genuine friendship. They had more in common than they realized. Both had been raised by their grandparents after their mothers moved to Detroit, and both didn't make the move to the city until they were 10 years old. That shared experience created a bond that would carry them through the early, uncertain years of chasing a music career. I was impressed with Melvin when I heard him sing with a group called the Voice Masters, Otis once recalled. He was just 16 years old, but he had this deep bass that sounded like a grown man. I had to meet him because, at the time, I really needed a bass singer for my group. That group was called the El Domingos, and it originally included Al Bryant, James Pryby Crawford, Bernard Plain, and Arthur Walton. Over time, the lineup began to change. Blue joined the group along with his cousin Richard Street and a singer named Mooch Harrell. They eventually caught the attention of local music figure Johnny Mae Matthews, who signed them to her label, Northern Records. She gave them a new name, The Distance. In 1959, The Distance recorded a track called Come On, which quickly became a local hit in Detroit. The buzz around the song was strong enough to catch the attention of Warwick Records, which picked it up for national distribution. Encouraged by the momentum, the group returned to the studio in 1960 to record another track titled All Right. Following its release, their manager, Johnny Mae Matthews, decided to make a bold move. She named Otis Williams the official leader and rebranded the group as Otis Williams and the Distance. Despite the name change and a couple of solid local hits, the group struggled to break through nationally. Their record sales remained modest. Still, their talent didn't go unnoticed. Berry Gordy, founder of the up-and-coming Motown Records, saw potential and offered them a deal. But just as things were looking up, two key members, Richard Street and Mooch Harrell, left the group, leaving Otis and the others scrambling to fill the gaps before they could sign with Motown. That's when Otis got a call from Eddie Kendricks, a talented tenor he'd crossed paths with before. Otis invited him to join and take the lead, but Eddie had one condition. His best friend Paul Williams had to come along too. Otis agreed without hesitation. With the new lineup in place, they briefly went by the name the Elgins. Back then, group names were recycled pretty often, and interestingly enough, Richard Street, one of the former members, would later form his own version of The Distance. Soon, the reformed group made their way to Hitsville, USA, to audition for Berry Gordy and the Motown team. Their harmonies blew everyone away, but Gordy wasn't sold on the name the Elgins. He told them to step outside and come back with a better one, before the sun went down. And they did. After tossing around a few questionable names, the Insults, the Pontiacs, the Covens, even the Radicals, and jokingly, Spectacles Testicles, they finally landed on the one that would make history, the Temptations. In late 1960, Melvin "Blue" Franklin received a tough diagnosis, rheumatoid arthritis. Despite the health setback, Blue pushed forward with the group, which at the time was still struggling to find its footing. In 1961, the Temptations released two singles, "Oh Mother of Mine" and "Check Yourself," both led by Paul Williams. While the songs showcased the group's potential, they didn't make much of a commercial impact. Part of the problem was that they were released under Miracle Records, a Motown sub-label that didn't have much pull. Berry Gordy soon realized this and decided to re-sign the group under his newly launched flagship label, Motown. By 1962, the group released Your Dream Come True, which reached number 22 on the R&B charts. It was a small victory, but a much-needed one. Still, between 1961 and 1963, the Temptations recorded 8 more songs, none of which gained serious traction. As the group struggled to break out, tensions began to rise. Al Bryant, one of the original members, was growing increasingly frustrated. With no major hits and still working a day job, the stress finally boiled over. During a Christmas concert hosted by Motown, he got into a heated altercation with Paul Williams. That fight would be his last straw. Otis Williams, as group leader, made the difficult decision to remove Al from the group. Then came a turning point. As 1964 arrived, the Temptations welcomed a new member, David Ruffin. His addition would kick off what fans now remember as the iconic Classic Five era. Smokey Robinson soon penned a song for Eddie Kendricks titled The Way You Do the Things You Do. This track finally broke the group into the mainstream, reaching number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. They followed up with other singles like Girl, Why You Wanna Make Me Blue, I'll Be in Trouble, and The Girl's All Right With Me, all featuring Kendricks on lead vocals. But Smokey had his eye on David Ruffin. He believed David had something different, something special. So Smokey wrote My Girl specifically for him. And it changed everything. The song became the Temptations' first #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 and solidified their place in music history. From that moment on, the dynamic within the group shifted. Eddie Kendricks stepped back, and David Ruffin took center stage as the group's new lead singer. As Melvin "Blue" Franklin continued performing with the Temptations, his battle with rheumatoid arthritis became more demanding. To manage the pain and stay on stage, He began taking cortisone shots. But while the treatment helped his joints, it came with a serious side effect. Blue developed diabetes as a result. Despite his health challenges, the group pressed forward and kept the hits coming. With David Ruffin now front and center, they released a trio of Smokey Robinson-written tracks that all landed on the Billboard Hot 100. It's Growing climbed to number 18, Since I Lost My Baby reached number 17, and My Baby pushed even higher to number 13. Around this time, another major shift was brewing behind the scenes. Motown producer Norman Whitfield wanted a shot at working with the Temptations. He approached Berry Gordy directly and made his case. Berry agreed, but with a condition. If Smokey Robinson's next single for the group didn't make it into the top 20, Norman could take over as their lead producer. The song Smokey delivered was Get Ready, led by Eddie Kendricks. It charted at number 29. That was Norman's opportunity, and he didn't hesitate. His first song with the group was a powerhouse, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, with Ruffin on lead vocals. It blew past Get Ready, peaking at number 13 on the Hot 100 and topping the R&B charts. Norman was officially in, and with him came a brand new sound. Inspired by the raw energy of James Brown, Whitfield added heavier bass lines and deeper soul grooves, reshaping the group's style into something bolder and more intense. The result? More hits. Beauty is Only Skin Deep hit number 3 on the Hot 100. I Know I'm Losing You reached number 8, and All I Need also climbed to number 8. During this golden period, known as the Classic 5 era, the Temptations released 6 iconic albums. Meet the Temptations, 1964, The Temptations Sing Smokey, 1965, The Temptin' Temptations, 1965, Gettin' Ready, 1966, With a Lotta Soul, 1967, Wish It Would Rain, 1968. But by 1967, tensions within the Temptations had started to rise, especially with David Ruffin. Fame had taken hold, and David began showing up late to rehearsals, sometimes skipping them altogether. He even refused to ride in the same limousine as the rest of the group. Then came the suggestion that pushed things over the edge. He approached Berry Gordy with the idea of renaming the group David Ruffin and the Temptations. That didn't sit well with Otis Williams. To him, the Temptations had always been a team, no one member above the rest. So when David declared, "I'm the one selling the records, they coming to see me. Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis," it was the final straw. The breaking point came in early June 1968. The group had been booked for an important performance hosted by Barbara Gail Martin, daughter of Dean Martin. David didn't show. For Otis, that was it. Enough was enough. On June 27th, 1968, the group officially let David go. David didn't take the news quietly. "Are you crazy? I'm sorry. Y'all are stupid. Get off me. Y'all ain't nothing without me. I made your asses. You can't fire me," he shouted. But the truth was, David's behavior and ego were becoming a liability. His actions didn't reflect the polished, unified image the group had worked so hard to build, an image that meant everything to Otis and Blue. Despite the shakeups, the Temptations kept moving forward. Over the years, as members came and went, Otis remained the anchor. In one interview, someone asked him, "You've been here since the beginning. With all the different eras of music and all the lineup changes, how have you managed to keep it going?" Otis simply replied, "I think we've been very fortunate. The people seem to enjoy what the Temptations represent." The interviewer smiled and said, "I can tell, because you always have us on your show." Just one day after David Ruffin's dismissal, on June 28, 1968, Otis Williams already had a replacement in mind. He reached out to Dennis Edwards, a powerhouse vocalist from the Contours. Otis made a few calls, pulled some strings, and by July 9th, Dennis was officially introduced as the newest member of the Temptations. But David Ruffin wasn't done just yet. Not long after Dennis joined, during one of the group's live performances, David stormed the stage uninvited and grabbed the microphone right out of Dennis's hand, right in the middle of the show. It was chaotic, emotional, and a clear sign that David wasn't ready to let go. Meanwhile, Melvin "Blue" Franklin finally got a moment to shine. He stepped up as lead on the track, "I Truly, Truly Believe," a beautiful showcase of his deep, resonant voice and underrated talent. Blue had always been the backbone of the group, holding things down quietly but powerfully. In late 1968, the Temptations teamed up with Diana Ross and the Supremes to record a collaborative album titled "Diana Ross and the Supremes Join the Temptations." During that time, there was even a brief romantic spark. Blue had a short-lived fling with Mary Wilson of the Supremes. With Dennis Edwards now leading the group, the Temptations' sound began to shift. Dennis came from a gospel background, having grown up singing in his father's church. His voice had a preacher's strength, bold, passionate, and commanding. That energy helped define a new era for the group. Their first major success with Dennis was "Cloud 9, a bold, psychedelic soul track that earned the Temptations their very first Grammy Award in 1969. And that was just the beginning. By 1970, the Temptations were on fire. They dropped hit after hit, landing 4 singles in the Billboard Hot 100's top 10. Leading the charge was "I Can't Get Next to You," which soared to number 1. But behind the scenes, things were far from smooth. Paul Williams was struggling with sickle cell anemia, and his health was rapidly declining. He also began drinking heavily, something Otis later said was heartbreaking to witness, especially since Paul had only ever drunk milk before. His depression ran deep, and many nights he wasn't able to perform. To keep the show going, Otis brought in Richard Street as a backup to quietly fill in for Paul during live performances throughout 1970 and 1971. At the same time, Eddie Kendricks was growing increasingly frustrated. With Paul's health deteriorating and David Ruffin gone, Eddie often clashed with both Otis and Blue. The tension sometimes boiled over into full-blown arguments, even physical fights. Eddie felt shut out of the decision-making process, saying Otis and Blue made all the calls. He also stayed in touch with David and even pushed to bring him back into the group. Beyond that, Eddie had his own gripes with Motown. He believed the label and Berry Gordy were underpaying the Temptations and mishandling their finances. But in 1971, Paul Williams received devastating news from his doctor. They had discovered a spot on his lungs. His health had been deteriorating for some time, and now it was clear he would have to retire from music. Around the same time, Eddie Kendricks was preparing to leave the group, but not before giving the Temptations one last gift. He recorded "Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me," a soulful ballad that soared to number 1 on the charts. It was a graceful exit. Soon after, Eddie was replaced by Damon Harris, while Richard Street officially stepped in to take Paul's place. In 1972, the Temptations followed up their hit with another classic. "Papa Was a Rollin' Stone." The song became a massive success, climbing all the way to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earning the group their second Grammy Award. While most people remember Dennis Edwards' powerful delivery on the track, few realized that the second verse was actually sung by Richard Street. His contribution added a haunting depth that helped make the song iconic. By 1973, tensions behind the scenes began to grow, particularly between the group and producer Norman Whitfield. The Temptations felt Norman had become too controlling and difficult to work with creatively. Around this time, Otis Williams made the decision to fire Damon Harris, citing issues with his professionalism and commitment, especially during the recording of "A Song for You." In 1977, the group left Motown and signed with Atlantic Records, hoping to find new success. But things didn't go as planned. They released 2 albums under Atlantic, both of which failed to make an impact. Then, in 1978, tragedy struck. Melvin "Blue" Franklin was injured while trying to stop someone from stealing his car. He was shot in the leg and the head and was placed on bed rest, unable to tour with the group. The setback was difficult, and by 1979, Atlantic had dropped the Temptations. Motown brought them back in 1980, and with that came yet another lineup change. Louis Price was let go, and Dennis Edwards was rehired. Berry Gordy himself stepped in to write and produce the title track for their comeback album, Power. While the song didn't crack the Billboard Hot 100's top 40, it did reach number 11 on the R&B charts. Still, the lukewarm reception led Gordy to question whether the group's era had run its course. But instead of giving up, Motown tried one more thing: a reunion tour featuring all the surviving members of the Temptations. It was a move meant to reignite the magic, and for a while, it worked. Throughout the 1980s, however, Melvin Franklin's health began to decline. He battled both arthritis and diabetes, relying on heavy medication just to keep performing. But the medication took a toll, weakening his immune system and eventually leading to a rare and aggressive flesh-eating disease. Even with everything he was going through, Blue rarely missed a performance. He kept showing up night after night, giving his all on stage. To many, Melvin "Blue" Franklin was the quiet strength of the Temptations. Through pain, illness, and personal hardship, he never let it stop him. His resilience and loyalty to the group were unmatched. By 1982, the Temptations were gearing up for a major comeback. Motown announced a highly anticipated reunion album, and for the first time in years, Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin rejoined the group. To give the project a modern edge, Berry Gordy paired them with Motown's reigning funk star, Rick James. Together they recorded "Standing on Top," a track that climbed to number 6 on the R&B charts. The collaboration didn't stop there. The Temptations also lent their harmonies to Rick James's "Super Freak." And here's a lesser-known detail: Melvin "Blue" Franklin contributed background vocals and those unmistakable ad-libs on "Give It to Me, Baby." Not only did they work well together musically, but Rick James and Blue were actually related. Although technically cousins, Blue always referred to Rick as his nephew. The reunion tour was a financial win, packing arenas and selling out venues across the country. But behind the scenes, it created serious tension within the group. Years of wear and tear had taken a toll on Eddie Kendricks, whose iconic falsetto was no longer what it used to be due to chronic smoking. Meanwhile, Blue performed with oxygen tanks stationed backstage so he could catch his breath between numbers. David Ruffin fell back into old habits and started missing shows again. On top of that, Dennis Edwards and Glenn Leonard often showed up late to rehearsals, further straining the group dynamic. When the tour wrapped, both David and Eddie were let go. The two eventually formed their own act and toured together as a duo. In 1983, following the reunion tour, the Temptations released another album titled Surface Thrills. But change was still in the air. Glenn Leonard was soon fired and replaced by Ron Tyson, marking yet another shift in the lineup. At this point, the revolving door of Temptations members had reached 14. In a lighthearted TV appearance, Otis Williams jokingly tried to keep track of the current members during an interview. "Kelvin Frank, how many people have been in the group over the years?" he asked. The response came quickly. "Now with Ron Tyson, it's 14. Otis then began introducing the lineup himself. "I'm Dennis Edwards, Melvin Franklin, Richard Street, Otis Williams, Ron Tyson." In the late 80s and early 90s, the Temptations were struggling to stay relevant. Despite releasing new music, audiences mostly wanted to hear their classic hits, and the group was starting to unravel. Allie "Ollie" Woodson stepped in to replace Dennis Edwards, but his time wasn't smooth. Otis fired him in 1984 for repeatedly showing up late. One of their notable songs from this period was "Treat Her Like a Lady," featuring Allie "Ollie" as the lead vocalist. While it didn't break into the top 40 on the Billboard Hot 100, it climbed all the way to number 2 on the R&B charts, becoming their biggest hit since 1975. In 1985, they released another single called Your Baby, penned by the legendary Luke from Ran Draws. The song reached number 14 on the R&B charts, but the revolving door continued. Ali Ali was fired again by Otis for missing rehearsals and showing up late. Dennis Edwards came back for the third time, making him the only member to rejoin the group 3 separate times. Meanwhile, in 1986, Melvin "Blue" Franklin tried his hand at acting, lending his voice to the animated series Pole Position, which ran for 13 episodes. The following year, The Temptations released their album Together Again. It featured hits like I Wonder Who She's Seeing Now, which reached number 3 on the R&B charts, and Look What You Started, which made it to number 8. Despite these successes, Dennis Edwards was fired once more by Otis the next year. Ali Ali Woodson returned to the group again in late 1988, continuing the cycle of comings and goings that marked this challenging era for the Temptations. On January 18, 1989, the Temptations were honored with an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The ceremony brought together current members Otis Williams, Melvin "Blue" Franklin, Ali Ali Woodson, Ron Tyson, and Richard Street, alongside former members David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks, and Dennis Edwards. In a touching tribute to the late Paul Williams, they performed his song Don't Look Back. Despite the celebratory mood, Otis later recalled that Eddie Kendricks had given him the cold shoulder throughout the day, adding a bit of tension to the occasion. A few years later, in 1992, Richard Street had to undergo emergency surgery to remove kidney stones, which forced him to miss a scheduled performance. Otis wasn't happy about the no-show and gave Richard a stern talking to. Feeling misunderstood and frustrated, Richard decided to leave the group in 1993. He was then replaced by Theo Peoples. During the early 90s, Melvin "Blue" Franklin's health started to decline, leading him to miss more performances. Ray Davis stepped in as a fill-in and eventually took over Blue's spot in 1994 when Blue had to retire due to worsening health. While Ray Davis was a capable replacement, many fans felt he simply wasn't Melvin Franklin. Blue was famously private about his family life, but it's known that he was married to Kimberly English, and together they had 5 children. Tragically, on February 15, 1995, Blue suffered a series of seizures that left him in a coma. He passed away 8 days later, on February 23rd, at just 52 years old. At the time of his passing in 1995, Melvin "Blue" Franklin, the legendary bass vocalist of the Temptations, had an estimated net worth of approximately $1 million. Franklin resided in a stately brick home located at 1160 Claremont Avenue in Detroit, Michigan. This residence, situated in the historic North End neighborhood, features classic early 20th century architecture. The 2-story structure boasts a symmetrical facade with a central front porch, flanked by decorative columns and a second-floor balcony. Large multi-pane windows allow for ample natural light, and the well-maintained lawn adds to the home's curb appeal. Today, the house at 1160 Claremont remains a notable landmark, reflecting the rich musical heritage of Detroit and the legacy of one of Motown's most iconic figures. While the neighborhood has undergone various changes over the years, the home continues to be a point of interest for fans and historians alike, symbolizing Franklin's enduring impact on the music industry. Blue's legacy is firmly cemented in music history. His deep, resonant voice became the signature sound of the Temptations, and to this day, many believe his shoes remain the hardest to fill among the group's legendary lineup.